Anyway, I have never been afraid of engaging scholars on their own subjects, mostly for fun. But don't my irreverence fool you, I do have concerns. That's why I'm here today. All that said, this video is for Dr. Dan McClellan.
What can I do for you?
Because I have 2 questions that I want to see if you can answer.
All right, let's see it.
Did that so you can make it look all mean in the edit. Make it look all mean like, I'm going to get you, because it's what people do to you, but sorry about that.
Well, I'm not that good at editing. You see,
Anyway, I do have 2 very, base level surface lore questions about things I've heard about being in the Bible, maybe. Number 1, something I asked when I was a kid and pretty much was told, that's cute, and the question was never addressed. I was told that jealousy was a deadly sin. I was told that God was a jealous God. That didn't fit together for me. It still doesn't.
Hey, thank you for a great question. The most simple and basic way to answer it is that the God of the Bible is very much a do as I say, not as I do deity. If that's not satisfactory, though, we can look at the difference between jealousy and envy. Most people use the word jealous today to refer to envy, and envy is something that you're commanded not to have in the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. The Hebrew verb there is chamad, to desire, and so it says do not covet or do not envy. And so that's one of the 7 deadly sins according to the post-biblical Christian innovation, which derives from earlier Greco-Roman ideologies. So most people today use jealousy to refer to envy, but historically the word jealousy has referred to something different. Rather than wanting something that someone else has, jealousy refers to not wanting to let anyone else have access to something that you already have, and usually it has to do with relationships with people. So when the text calls God a jealous God, that is a reference to the fact that God has a relationship with Israel and does not want Israel to worship other gods. This is an exclusive relationship. You're not going to go worship other gods because I am jealous of our relationship. And so that's a different sense of jealousy that a lot of people don't think of when they hear the word jealousy. And so you can think of God's jealousy as being distinct from the commandment not to envy, but the Hebrew Bible also treats that type of jealousy as problematic in and of itself. So we return back to the more basic answer. The God of the Bible is very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of deity.
Number 2, it is Sunday. And my spouse is feeling just a tad under the weather, and I'm like, hey, even creation, even God needed the day off. Yeah, that 7th day God rested. Why would a God need to rest? Yeah, it's like creating reality and stuff, and yeah, that's gonna take it out of you, but to have a limit, to require recuperation, maybe I'm watching too many of your videos, it struck me how weird that is.
Another great question, and there are 2 things to think about here. The first is that this creation account that has God resting is the priestly creation account, composed probably in the middle to the late 6th century BCE. It runs from Genesis 1:1 to the first half of Genesis 2, verse 4. And this account is probably adopting and adapting earlier creation accounts from Mesopotamia. And in those traditions, the gods have to do an awful lot of upkeep on the universe that they've created. And so humanity is created in order to be their enslaved group of people to do the work that they don't want to do so that they can relax. And then in one of the accounts, humanity is too noisy, and so the head deity decides they're going to destroy humanity with this worldwide flood. And so the deities of these Mesopotamian creation accounts are very anthropopathic. So they have human desires and emotions and reactions to things, just like the God of the Bible frequently does. And so that is what is being adopted and then adapted to fit the ideologies of the authors of this first creation account. And so saying God needs to rest after creation just fits in with the zeitgeist of that time period, although they are heavily editing what's going on, changing the story quite a bit. And that brings up the second thing to consider. Part of the point of this creation account is to function as an etiology or an origin story for a standardized 7-day week, which probably originates in Israel's time in Babylon, and a Sabbath day, a standardized day of rest and of worship as a part of that week. Prior to the composition of this creation account, a Sabbath was an irregular occurrence that usually coincided with a festival or something like that. And so this is instituting a weekly Sabbath, and one argument for why is that they don't have the sacred space of the Temple of Jerusalem anymore. It has just been destroyed, or maybe is just being rebuilt, or has just been rebuilt. And so in the absence of that sacred space, we still want a way for people to worship. And so maybe let's carve out sacred time, and we'll treat it as sacred. You don't bring in outside stuff to sacred space. Like God tells Moses, take your sandals off your feet. This is holy ground. The idea being, don't traipse outside dirt onto my holy ground. It's supposed to be set apart and consecrated. And so by resting on the Sabbath, what people are doing is not bringing in the outside world to this time that has been set apart for worship and sacralized. And so one possible reason for the idea of the Sabbath is to carve out sacred time for worship in the absence of our sacred space. And so in Genesis 1, one way to account for that is to say God rested on that day. God kept all their normal work outside of this time period, and so we're going to do the same thing. And so in that sense, it may be an etiology, an origin story for the Sabbath, and why we need to not bring in any of our outside baggage to this sacred time.
So thank you for your time and attention, and I think that your co-host, Dan Beecher, would agree with me when I say, plug the podcast.
Yeah, he probably would. If you're interested in longer form content that does the same thing that I try to do on social media, my friend Dan Beecher and I have started up the Data Over Dogma podcast. We have new episodes that drop every Monday. They're about an hour each. Some are interviews with scholars publishing in the field. Others are just discussions between the two of us. You can find them wherever fine podcasts are given away for free. You can go to dataoverdogmapod.com as well. And if for whatever reason you are not as discomforted by my face as I am, you can also find us on YouTube. And if you would like early ad-free access as well as exclusive bonus content, you can go to patreon.com/dataoverdogma and check out the incentives we have available there.